Good afternoon again, and welcome to our second workshop of the day. My name is Anya Bobadilla, and I'm part of CABE's professional development team. Today, along with my colleague Gande here, we'll be supporting with any questions, and we'll be monitoring the chat throughout our session. I'm really excited now to introduce our presenter, who is my Director of Professional Development, Rubí Flores. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful session. I'll pass it on to Rubí now.
Thank you so much. And yes, Anya is usually presenting alongside with me, so she will be here supporting as well today. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to our session. My name is Rubí Flores. I'm the Director of Professional Learning for CABE, and I have the pleasure of working with a lot of districts, a lot of colleagues, a lot of people supporting dual language programs, English learner support. So we're happy to share some of the work that we have done in the past and that we can do, and we do with some of the districts that we work with. So today we're going to talk about creating biliteracy learning communities, and we're going to talk about a framework for dual language professional learning and how we can really target our bilingual teachers or dual language teachers and making sure that we're meeting their needs. So we will be sharing with you a folder with the few resources that you'll need, and then also the links that we'll be using today. So we'll be posting those in the chat. And just a little bit about CABE PDS. We are the CABE's Professional Development Services, and we do different things across the state, from consulting, providing professional development at events like this or other CABE events, as well as supporting our districts with the implementation of the EO roadmap, and also, right, supporting our districts as they develop and refine their dual language programs. So this is, we work across the state, and, you know, because of this great technology, Zoom opportunity, right, we were able to reach now also a lot of other people out of state, which is a great thing for us and for everyone else. And I just want to give you a quick moment to say hello in the chat. And we're going to use one of these gratitude prompts. I do want you to use a prompt, right? I want you to pick one, whichever one you can connect with the most, just to say hello to everyone in the room, but then also to get to know a little bit about you, and also to set our mindset, right, to feeling good about ourselves and about our lives, especially when we have so much going on, right? So for me, a memory I am grateful for is the wonderful sessions that I've had the opportunity to attend in previous CABE conferences. That keeps us going, and we're excited to be here, even though we're not in person, but we're still able to connect and to learn from each other and to calibrate. That's one of the things that I love the most about attending conferences, where you hear like-minded people and you hear ideas, and you learn so much from what others do, that it's one of the best memories that I have. So I'll give you a few seconds to post in the chat a memory that you're grateful for. And please remember, let's use one of the gratitude prompts. Let's think about all those great things in our lives that we can be grateful for. So give you a few seconds to think as you think about sharing. Let's start seeing some posts. Perseverance. That's been a very much needed skill, right? The health of our children, for our family, for our friends. Thank you for sharing that. And just continue to share and continue to think about those things that make you happy, right? And that's always great to think about. All right. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, and please continue to share. This will help us set a positive mindset for today and the rest of our day. So these are our objectives for today, and I know our time is very limited, so I'm going to try to get to as much as I can and give you as much information and ideas as we can. But we are going to explore a professional learning framework that responds to the needs of biliteracy instruction and dual language classrooms. For our language objective today, we're going to create a written reflection of our current implementation of dual language instructional practices, which I'm going to ask you to reflect on what you currently do and then also on how you can promote more responsive professional development systems for your teachers. And then we also have a sociocultural objective, which is to reflect on the effects of historical sociopolitical perspectives in language education in order to redefine professional learning as a tool for dismantling oppression in multilingual environments. So we're going to go beyond just what teachers normally get, beyond thinking about how, not just how we prepare them, but also how do we build our teachers' capacity to advocate for themselves, for their students, and for the needs of their communities. So I want you to take a minute and just reflect on these 3 questions, okay? Just reflect, just think. And then I'm gonna walk you through a timeline that focuses on the policies, just the sociopolitical history of bilingual education. And so I want you to think about what was the drive behind these educational policies that we're gonna read about, and what have been the repercussions of these events for our linguistically diverse student population. And the last question is, what have been the repercussions for educators in bilingual programs? So use these 3 questions as anchors as you think about and you read about, right, the history of our education system, especially for when it comes to our English learners, okay, and our multilingual populations. So I'm going to play the next few slides, and I'm actually going to just give you a few seconds to read them. We are also going to share with you in the chat a link to the handout of today. And so you'll have these, all of these slides as well for you to, if you don't get to read everything on the screen, don't worry, we'll give you the slides so that you can reflect on them also at a later time. And then also that you can use them for your own professional development. All right, so I'm gonna give you a few seconds and just read through the slides on your own. And as you're reading these, I do want you to take a minute and post in the chat your reactions. Right? What do you think? What does it make you feel? What reflections can you take from these slides, this history of our education system and the supports that have been provided to our multilingual learners? So just share with us in the chat as you read through these. All right, so I hope you had a chance to read through that and reflect on the 3 questions that I proposed to you when we started our session. So what was the drive behind these educational policies? What do you, from experience, from what you know, what we learned, what we see, what do you think was the drive? What have been the repercussions of those events for our students, our linguistically diverse students, but then also for our bilingual teachers, our teachers that work in with multilingual learners, our teachers that work in bilingual dual language programs. And I'm going to give you a chance to reflect and post in the chat your thoughts, but I'm also going to ask 2 people, and I wish we had more time and I would send you in breakout groups, but we don't. So I do want to hear from at least 2 people. What are your thoughts? What comes to mind when you read this and when you think about these questions? So we'll take 2 comments and you can just unmute your mics. I think everybody's still reflecting. But thank you for posting in the chat. So everyone should know this history. Not everybody knows, right? Not everybody knows.
Yeah, and then some comments as well would be oppression and fear. Sadly, dual immersion language was not valued, and how there's a lot of misunderstanding about language acquisition. So those are some of the key comments I saw in the chat.
Yes, no, thank you for that. And yes, you're right. There are so many misconceptions. There were so many misconceptions then, but the sad thing is that there are still so many misconceptions now. As you can see, things, unfortunately, these policies come and go, right? They go away, and we make, we take big, huge steps, but there's always that fear, right, from other people, especially people that don't understand or don't know the process, right? So that's why it's very important to think about how we're preparing our teachers, not only, yes, of course, to teach, using great best practices and first grade instruction, but then also to become advocates and to have the tools to respond, right, when we have those when we hear those misconceptions, when we hear that fear, right, from people about that don't understand the purpose of multilingual education. So thinking about how we can start preparing and thinking about how we can dismantle, right, and clear a lot of those misconceptions is what programs, what do we have in place now, right? And one of those things is the seal of biliteracy. I mean, promoting it, preparing not just our students, but also our teachers to become advocates of it. We know that there's still a lot of programs that don't have a clear process for identifying students that could earn their seal of biliteracy. And, we hear about it all the time. So how are we preparing our staff, right, so that they can create those systems so that we can start looking and recruiting those kids that speak those languages, and they don't have to apply or they don't have to look into it, but that we are reaching out to them. So that is one thing that we can start thinking about and focusing on how we can prepare our staff to do that. Also thinking about how we're using, and in California, if you're visiting us from another state, we have the California Quality Professional Learning Standards. And these are great guidelines to prepare our teachers. But one thing that we want to keep in mind is that a lot of these policies, a lot of these guidelines and recommendations are written through a monolingual lens, right? Are written through, how do we support our mainstream students? How do we support, they don't necessarily call out for our multilingual students. So us as educators, as professional development providers, we have to start thinking through the lens of multiliteracy when we think about these standards. So we have great PD standards or professional learning standards that focus on student data, right? Focusing on content and pedagogy, preparing our teachers and making sure that we do ensure those equitable outcomes so that all students are receiving first quality instruction, and then also that it's ongoing, intensive, and embedded in practice. Thinking about how we are collaborative and sharing accountability across our systems, and that we're providing adequate resources, and that we are aligned to this standards and policies. These are great, but one thing that we want to make sure is that we also think, how can we implement these through a monolingual, not monolingual, but multilingual lens, right? Usually these are addressed in a professional learning that is created for teachers that teach in English, because that is the mainstream language in our society, right? But they don't always necessarily prepare bilingual teachers with the effective biliteracy practice instruction, right? So we want to think about how we're promoting and creating opportunities of professional learning in multilingual settings to redefine and dismantle systems of oppression, right? If we want to change that history, then we need to be able to provide our teachers the tools to change that history. And so we want to think about how we're going to prepare them by giving them and making them reflect, and ourselves reflecting on those inequities that we know exist in professional learning, especially for our teachers that teach in multilingual settings. How many times do we go to trainings and we all go to this great training about reading or writing or math or science, but then everything is presented in English. And as a bilingual teacher, you have to turn around and recreate everything, or you have to turn around and now you have to dig and find the resources. And of course it's great information, but it's not changing the system, right? It's not changing those, it's not getting rid of those inequities that exist for our multilingual learners. So it's actually making it more difficult for bilingual teachers to provide the type of instruction that we would want to see, right? That high quality instruction, because they have so much on their plate that they have to create, or that they have to do on their own, right? A lot of times we talk about how bilingual teachers or dual language teachers have to do twice the work. Well, they shouldn't have to always do twice the work. We know that they have twice the skills, but it shouldn't mean that they have to do twice the work. So how are we providing opportunities for them to have all the resources, have all that training and information that they need, so that they can focus on what's most important, which is teaching our kids, right? Providing high quality instruction. And especially that we provide that professional learning in the language of instruction, right? It's not the same thing when you have to translate everything. And we know, as a native Spanish speaker, I can tell you that I have to read and I have to work, and I have to read articles and books, and I watch Netflix in Spanish, and I read, right? I mean, we have to continuously work on our language because we don't use it all the time, especially our academic language. So we have to provide teachers that opportunity for them to also use that language and continue to grow their capacity with the language. So thinking about that, we want to think and rephrase, right? Those I forgot the QPLs, right? The professional learning standards, right? We want to redefine those and start thinking on how we can look at those through a multilingual lens, right? A biliteracy lens. So if we're going to ask these questions about the PD that we're providing, we want to also ask these questions, right, about our focused on biliteracy. So what students and educator biliteracy data, right? Not just data, but if we're working with bilingual teachers, what biliteracy data should be analyzed? What must the focus be for biliteracy content and pedagogy, right? Because we know that the practices are different. What equitable biliteracy outcomes must it address? How can it be ongoing, intensive, and embedded in biliteracy practices? Not just, again, we have to reframe our thinking to think through a bilingual, biliteracy, multilingual lens, right? So I want you to read through these questions, and then I'm actually going to ask you to go to a Menti. If you don't know about this, it's a great tool for people to share their thoughts and through a virtual platform. So we're going to share with you in the chat a link that you can use and click. Once you click that link, you will see this screen, and it's going to ask you to respond to this question. What are the components of effective biliteracy professional learning? Okay, so think about what are those components, and just share real quick your thoughts about what would that look like if we are going to create this amazing professional learning session where we are going to focus on best practices through a bilingual biliteracy lens. What would that look like? And I'm going to give you a few seconds to think through that. And if you click the link, it should take you directly to this page. And we're going to see what you are posting. So I'll give you a few seconds to think and then post your answers to the question. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Research-based practical information, exactly. Research-based, and we have to remember that we want to look at biliteracy research, right? Where if we're teaching in Spanish, let's look at research that tell us how Spanish works, right? Not how English works. It's very important, again, right? When we're thinking about providing professional learning, that we're thinking through, again, a biliteracy lens, right? Or a multiliteracy lens. Support and pedagogical decisions, right? Resources available in the language that, yes, that we are teaching and that our teachers are teaching in. And sometimes we can't buy these resources. Sometimes, and we know that, we understand and we know that there is a lack of resources a lot of times for dual language teachers, because not everything that is in Spanish or Mandarin, right, or Korean, not everything is always aligned to the standards. So that also brings us to think, how can we as a district, right, as instructional leaders, how can we create or provide those resources? How can we create committees of teachers? And yes, of course, how can we compensate them, or how can we create opportunities to bring experts, right, to help us create some of those resources that our teachers need, and so that they don't have to create their own, that we have consistency across our program on what's available to teachers. A lot of times we see a lot of discrepancy once, even when we have several schools that have a dual language program, but not all the schools receive the same type of resources, right? So we want to think, how can we provide consistency across with best practices, professional learning, and also with resources that teachers will need. Right. So thank you for sharing all of these great comments, and we'll hope you're looking through these, and we will continue to look at through these, and I will share also this with you so that you can see some of the responses that we have. All right. So going back to our framework. So thinking of all of this that we just talked about, right, or I talked about, I want you to think and reflect, and I'm going to show you an example of what that could look like. How can we create biliteracy professional learning communities that commit to include all stakeholders? Not just the dual language teachers need professional learning on biliteracy instruction or biliteracy support, right? Everybody in the campus would benefit. Anyone that has any type of contact with a dual language student should know about best practices for dual language learning. How can we intentionally include this framework, right, or these supports in our district's professional learning plan. So it's not an afterthought, right? So it's not an, oh yes, and then we also have to do something for the dual language teachers, but it's intentionally placed in there, knowing that we do have different needs when it comes to our dual language teachers. Focusing on achieving the 3 core goals, again, like somebody mentioned in the Menti, right, that we're focusing on bilingualism and biliteracy, high academic achievement, and sociocultural competence. And that we understand that the sociopolitical context of language education, and that we commit to advocating for linguistic justice, that we commit for asking for those supports, and we commit to creating resources and funding those supports that our teachers need, because it is linguistic justice. And that we develop a biliteracy instructional, biliteracy instructional leaders and coaches. It's not just as easy to say, okay, now you're going to coach a dual language teacher, or okay, now you have to be the dual language coach, right? We also need to provide those instructional leaders with the professional learning that they need. And all of these people that you see in here, right, is what we think a dual language coach, an advocate, that's what we want. We want leaders, we want advocates, we want teachers that have the capacity to continue to also support each other. And again, you're going to get these slides, but here are just some great resources, right? That when we're doing book clubs or where we're providing professional learning, that we are looking at those instructional resources that will address the needs of multilingual learners, but then also that are going to prepare teachers with the tools that they need, or coaches with the tools that they need to become effective coaches of dual language teachers. So I'm going to present you a framework and an example of how this has been done at a district where I had the opportunity and pleasure to work as a coach myself. And this was the framework that we used, and we created a cycle of reflection, planning, and coaching. And so this was a year-long process to support teachers with, yes, professional learning, but also with ongoing coaching and support, and focused on looking at data, student data, but then also focused on what works for biliteracy. So what we want to do is identify the members of that biliteracy professional learning community, which, like I said, it doesn't have to be just the dual language teachers, your counselor, your librarian, your special education teachers, right? Anyone that, again, has any contact with dual language student should also be receiving that type of support to understand the best practices so that they can coordinate and that they can work together. We want to look and analyze teacher and student data to determine a focus of study. There are so many things that we could prepare or plan for, right? But we want to think what's going to make the biggest impact and focus on that area. We also want to identify systemic inequities that affect the progress. Why is this happening, and how? What is the sociopolitical history of our district, right? Of our population, and how can we create a professional learning plan that's going to help us, right, change that? That's going to help us get rid of those inequities that exist in our schools, in our districts, and in our communities. And how can we create a shared goal and a timeline to engage in that ongoing learning? Then we want to identify the resources and professional learning opportunities that our teachers will need to get to that goal that has been set, right? And then we want to, throughout the year, right, throughout that time, engage in coaching and inquiry cycles to implement evidence-based practices. And this is where the meat of the work is, right, is how can we provide that ongoing support to our teachers through coaching cycles. And of course, always coming back, analyzing our results, and reflecting on the progress to plan for next steps based on our data. So again, we are really focusing and targeting the areas that are going to give us the best results for our students in multilingual programs. And then of course, when we start the cycle again, because again, this is meant to be an ongoing system that we can implement so that our teachers like feel supported, right? But then they also become active learners themselves when it comes to best practices. So this is just a picture of my team that I had the pleasure of working with. And so this is a process that we did ourselves. Just wanted to give you an example. So we had 13 dual language teachers from pre-K through 5th grade, one DL interventionist, our administrators, and then we also had a dual language paraprofessional, and our course, the coach, right? And we were all part of that learning community. And our administrators were not bilingual, right? But they were still part of it. Our counselor was not bilingual, but again, she was still part of it. And our librarian was not bilingual, but she was also part of it. Again, because we knew, right, that they needed to receive that information as well. We analyzed student language data to determine progress of biliteracy development. We realized that our kids were not really building biliteracy to the rate that we wanted them to, right? Or that was expected, right? And we had just switched from a 50-50 model to a 90-10 model. So we wanted to see, right, how they did and how we could improve, right, or accelerate their biliteracy development. And one thing that we noticed was, after looking at our data and reflecting on our context, that we have a very monoglossic perspective of education in our program structure. So we had too much separation of languages, too much only Spanish time, only English time, but we never really addressed biliteracy. So we noticed that was a big area of growth for us, because our kids, again, they were either really high in English, really high in Spanish, but we didn't see that biliteracy development flourish as much as we wanted it to. So what we did, we created a goal to develop higher levels of biliteracy. Our timeline was we were going to provide 4 half days of PD, and then 1 monthly hour-and-a-half meeting, and that was our bilingual professional learning community. That was our every month. We were going to come in together and talk about, read. We were going to read, and we read biliteracy from the start. We read Teaching for Biliteracy. We looked at, we attended NAVE, we attended La Cosecha, we attended Adelante in Austin, Texas, and we also had our 4 PD sessions. So this was our whole year plan to provide teachers with that support, but then also to engage in that ongoing learning. And then every teacher engaged in a 4 to 5 week coaching cycle with me, the coach, right? And on an area that focused specifically on a strategy that was aiming to support biliteracy. So we, some teachers chose the bridge, other teachers chose cross-linguistic transfer, but it was strategies that we, according to our learning, right, were going to support our students to develop their biliteracy. Then after the year was over, we reviewed our data, and we did see monoliteracy gap narrowing of 20%. We saw kids Spanish go up and English go up, right, for both our linguistic groups. And so from there, we planned to continue implementation on biliteracy practices. And from that, we started again the next year with a new cycle. So that's the process that we took. I do have some videos of teachers' reflections, which I don't have time to show you, but we do provide you with the link to the teachers' reflections on, and this was at the end of the year that we asked them questions to reflect on. And it was part of our inquiry cycle, right? It was how can we, through our reflections, gather more data about what we're going to focus on for the next year. And one thing that we didn't have then, but we do have now, is our dual language teacher reflection journal, which CABE, in collaboration with Cal, created to support teachers with specific principles or elements, right, that are aligned to the guiding principles that teachers can control in their classrooms. So what instructional practices can I as a teacher focus on and control, and how can I rate myself, right, to know where I am? We are going to share this journal with you as well, and so you'll find it in the chat. And again, we don't have time to review it. Yeah, if we did, we'd give you a whole lot of stuff to do. But I wanted to make sure and share this with you. It is organized by the 3 pillars. So there's about 10 to 11 elements under each pillar. So it is, what does the research say, right? I, as a teacher, can do to support my students for all 3 of the pillars. And this is what it looks like. And the handout does have instructions, right, on how to look at it and how to use it. The instructions are also on the journal, so you guys have access to all of this information. Again, I'm not going to go into all of it, but it is in your slides so that you can see these. All right, and I know I just gave you a whole lot of information. I was trying to get to as much, and I believe we do have about 2 minutes. If anybody has any thoughts or questions.
There was a question here, Rubí. Somebody asked about what practices were used in terms of the timeline when you were speaking about it.
What practices were used in terms of
that made the difference in closing the gap for biliteracy?
So the big one, because this one is one that we all tried as a team, right? And then teachers chose their own, but we, the one that we saw work the most and the best was the bridge. Bridging was huge for us. Creating that time, right, where teachers would actually focus on teach cross-linguistic transfer, and at the end of their unit, they would, bridge from English to Spanish and from Spanish to English. To make sure that kids develop their biliteracy. That was probably the one that we saw had the most impact. It was also the most engaging for kids. Kids loved being those metalinguistic, thinkers and experts. And so I would say that was probably the one that created the most. Okay. Well, I think we're out of time, but we are going to share our information with you if you're interested. Just wanted to share with you, of course, our CABE 2021 virtual swag bag, right? And also let you know that we are going to be holding our Summer Spanish Dual Language. This is our 4th one and our 2nd virtual. So we do invite you to save the date, and registration will be opening in April. So very soon. But it will be June 23rd to June 25th. So save the date for that. And of course, there's also a link. We'll share with you a link if you want to contact us, learn more about what we do and how we can support your programs. But thank you so much for being here, and I hope this was helpful, and feel free to reach out to Anya or myself.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Rubí, for all your information. We're now going to take our 10-minute break before you enter into your next workshop. So please remember to review the program and select the session you would like to attend. We thank you so much for joining us on our at our first CABE 2021 virtual conference. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.